The disciples' grief will turn to joy. Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this, some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? And because I'm going to the Father." They kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying." Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you, now is your time of grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. In that day you will no longer ask me anything. Very truly I tell you, my Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. Until now you have not asked for anything in my name. Ask, and you will receive, and your joy will be complete."
Thanks, Josh. Looks like you're hurting a little bit from the traffic. That's the way I feel getting out of bed in the morning. Does this have to be turned on? That's. This is Mike. Is that on? Test. Can you hear me? Okay, good. So I suppose some of you came here to church this morning and at some point in church today, either when you're driving home or you're having lunch or you're having coffee later, a conversation might turn to how well the sermon went today. And I know that you'll cut me some slack because I'm not a pastor, and however, I'm well aware that a message will somehow be judged. And I'm using judge very loosely. It won't be judged, but there's some criteria that people are looking for when they come to hear a sermon. And some people are looking that, there might be some interesting illustrations that you'll use. I like those because they make a sermon more interesting. Or somebody might say, they're looking at some deep spiritual points, and that's valid as well. And others are just looking at the clock. So, and to illustrate this, there was a retired pastor who was called to fill pulpit at a small country church that he hadn't been to before. Well, it was a small town church. And so he pulls up into the driveway of the church, and as he's getting out, he sneezes, and his dentures fall out. They hit on the ground, and he steps out of the car, and he steps on the dentures and breaks them. Well, he's quite distraught. What is he going to do? So he puts the dentures, puts them in his pocket. As he comes into the foyer, he meets the deacon, and the deacon is waiting for him and said, I've got a bit of a problem. I can't really preach because my dentures are broken. And so deacon says, well, just wait here. Put him in the office, and the deacon runs out to his car, comes back with a briefcase. And the deacon pulls in the briefcase and pulls out a set of dentures. Here, try these. Pastor puts them in and goes, no, those are too big. They're going to fall out. I'm sure if I'm preaching, they'll come flying out of my mouth. So the deacon reaches in his briefcase and again pulls out another set of dentures. Here, try these. Puts them in. Oh, those are tight. They hurt. I couldn't possibly preach with those dentures then. Deacon reaches in again into his briefcase, pulls out a third set of dentures, and puts them in. He says, those are perfect. Pastor went out to preach. Service went well. So at the end of the service, he's meeting with the deacon again, and he says, oh, what a blessing to know that, I come to the church here and I have a problem, and there's a denturist here that, that can fix this up. And the deacon says, the denturist? He says, no, I'm not a denturist. He says, what are you? He says, I'm the undertaker. So I'm hoping from this morning's message, there is something that you will find that will fit. And so I'm not a pastor. The topic of my sermon today, or my message, is cultivating joy. Growing up on the farm, we had a garden, and it had to be Or if you had a flower bed, it had to be cultivated. It had to be looked after. And I'm a bit of a... I used to say I enjoy gardening. Now I'm just saying I like gardening. And I'm thinking I like gardening more last year than I'm going to like it next year. And it just seems to be May, June, July. I'm really into it. I'm putting in the seeds and pulling out weeds. And along comes, late July, August. I'm not too excited about it anymore. In September, I'm just going to let go. I don't need this anymore. And it becomes frustrating, just trying to keep that garden clean, trying to keep out the weeds, trying to keep it fertilized, trying to keep it watered, trying to keep it looking good. And so joy is the same way. It needs to be cultivated. It needs to be something that you exercise and something that you need to work on daily. And I'm sure we've encountered people who are Christians, and I grew up on a dairy farm, and I'm sure if they looked at a can of cream, they could sour it. That they just didn't have that joy. The way they just sour it every time they entered the room. And that's not what God's called us for. He's called us that we should be joyful. What brings me joy? Well, joy is kind of the English language is kind of loose, and you kind of grasp what a joy is. Holding a newborn baby, that's joy. And I find joy just being with Virginia, and we have the times together, and that brings me joy. And when Lucas' eyes light up when he's telling me about his gaming thing, and something has to go here, something goes here, he's all excited about it. I don't have a clue what he's talking about, but that brings me joy. Or when he's talking about his future plans, that brings me joy. I have a dog that idolizes me, and every time I knock at the door, he's kind of jumping up on my leg. Well, that's kind of joyful. A nice piece of cheese, a nice piece of fine chocolate. Those things are, but is that joy? Well, joy is a priceless gift, and it's not meant to be gobbled up over and over again. It's sort of just something that brings you just that sense of contentment and sense of peace. Happiness is based on our circumstances and what's happening around us. And joy is a choice we make regardless of our circumstances. And happiness comes out of the same root word as happening. And that means that our happiness is based on something that has happened to us. Happiness is circumstantial. However, joy is something that defies circumstances and can occur in difficult situations. Happiness is a feeling, where joy is an attitude. And people say, well, I'll be happy when, if you're in high school, I'll be happy when I finish school. And then I'll be happy if I get a job. I'll be happier if I get a better job. I'll be happy if I get a car. And then if I get a car, I'll be happier if I get a better car. And I'll be happy if I get a girlfriend. Then I'll be happy if I get a wife. And then you see where this is all going. And I'll be happy when I get married, or when the kids leave the house, and then when they're grandkids, when the grandkids go home, or when I get retired. There's all these things that I think will make us happy. And we see people in the pursuit of happiness, and that it just consumes them to buy things and get things, and just be part of, that ideal of what will make us happy. How many of you are on social media? You've got one of these. And it's estimated that there's probably about 3 billion people in the world right now that have these devices, and they are everywhere. When I was working up north in the Arctic Circle, Inuit, everybody carries them up there. It's just part of their life, as it is ours here. And, more than 81% of us have some sort of social profile. Now get this, in the year 2000, about 19 years ago, some theologians got together and they talked about our culture and the effect it has on hope. And even back then when Facebook was just budding out, just starting, they were looking at the impact of social media. And they came to the conclusion that with the advancement of social media, it tends to preoccupy our time with the past and the present, but rather than tool to be used to fix our hope on the future of Christ. It tends to drag us down. And when you consider the amount of hours that people spend on social media, they say that the average teenager is 5 to 7 hours a day. Could you imagine if we spent 5 to 7 hours a day looking for joy and praising the Lord? You'd say, well, I can't do that. That's going to take all my day. Yet somehow we seem to fit it in. And we have those moments that happen to us, and these theologians that studied this, they defined it in two types of things. They call it hot cultural moments, and hot cultural moments are those that are profound, and they have the ability to transform us. And they're things that help us and draw us to God and give us value. Those cool cultural moments, cool ones, are ones that are disposable and shallow, and those are things like looking at cats and dogs and fails on your little device. Those are, yeah, for a moment or two they're okay, but you forget about them and they really have no value to your life. But we get wrapped up in the sort of cool cultural moments. Okay, we get wrapped up in those things. However, the things of value, the things of drawing us closer to God, that takes too much time. We kind of shelf those. And unfortunately, we engage too often in those cool cultural moments. And I think many Christians don't have a good grasp on what is the nature of Christian hope. They have some vague belief about what happens after death, but they don't really understand the implication of joy and hope in our everyday life. When we don't know where our hope is fixed, then we have lack of joy and peace. We have to know where our hope comes from. And so today we look at the Gospel of John, and Jesus is giving his farewell to the disciples. And he's giving them sort of a last goodbye, and he's giving them, trying to give them some hope. And I'm always amazed at the disciples, right? Bunch of guys, and Jesus is talking to them. He's trying to clarify what he means, and they go, huh? Well, all my years as a teacher, I've understood this. Because you can talk to a classroom, and you're trying to give a point across, and you think you had it totally crystal clear. There is nothing that you left dangling that they could possibly tear apart. And you ask, do you understand this? And everybody in the class is this, look like, what did you just say? I didn't get it. And I think that's the disciples. And he's talking to them that things are going to get rough. Things are going to be tough. But in spite of the tough things that's coming ahead of you, you have to have hope in this world that's full of evil and full of suffering. And that hope is in Jesus Christ. And our hope is not just an illusion or wishful thinking. It's grounded in Christ. And so, if he's in verse 16, as he's talking to the disciples, he's telling them, for a little while, and you will no longer behold me, and in a little while you will see me. And so he's trying to give them some sort of timeline, and they're not picking up on it. And so he's trying to say, I'm reminding you that something is going to happen. And these circumstances that are going to happen are not going to be good. Circumstances around you are not going to be good. And, it's going to overtake you. But your hope and your joy is in me. Trust in me. And so, over and over again, we see Jesus in his ministry and in the Gospels. He talks to the disciples about, coming to him. Come to me, all you who are thirsty. The kingdom of God has come near to you. Come, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And you think after 3 years of being with Jesus, you might have an understanding of this. We have the scriptures. We can go back, and looking backwards is always easier than looking ahead. So I can see that the disciples were going to find it difficult. They were going to find it hard to understand what Jesus is talking about. So how do we have joy in difficult circumstances? How do we have joy when things don't go well? We had the opportunity to attend a funeral a couple of weeks ago of a very dear friend. Ruth grew up in northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Her father was a shantyman. And shantyman ministries, if you don't know, back in the day in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, shantyman ministries was a pastor or a lay pastor would go out to bush camps to talk to minister to those working in lumber mills and mines and that type of thing. So it was kind of rough work. And so they didn't have a very good start. There was quite a number of kids in the family. And Ruth got into nursing, and she came out to St. Rose, where we live, and she started attending our church, and she married one of the farmers in the church, and things seemed to be going well. They had a baby, and at 3 months old, the baby passed away from pneumonia. And it was hard. It was devastating. And then a few years later, her husband came down with MS. And progressively, it became worse and worse, and he became housebound, and then he became tied up in bed for a long period of time. And during that time, one of her husband's habits, he was a smoker, and in an attempt to light a cigarette one day in his easy chair, dropped the match, or I don't know how it happened, but anyways, the living room started on fire. And she managed to get him out, and I will never remember going back the next day. We were going to help clean up, and my dad and myself walked in. And here's Ruth on the floor of this living room, and it's charred. And she's singing, "How Great Thou Art." Ruth was one of those people in the church that did absolutely everything. I mean, she was a Sunday school teacher, she was a soloist, she was a treasurer, if there was a job to do in the church, she was there to help out. And then, sometime later, the elf passed, and her husband, and then she came to live with us for 2 years. She went to Brandon University, took her Bachelor of Nursing degree, went on, moved to Winnipeg. Her mother was ill, and then her mom passed, and then she found another man who had lost his wife to cancer, and so she married him, and they had one daughter, and then Ruth developed Alzheimer's, and became progressively worse, and it was sort of funny because she was a nurse, so in the care home, they just gave her a little clipboard with a pen, and she thought she was the nurse on duty, and eventually breast cancer took her, but she is one of the people, when you talk about somebody who has Christian joy, she was always joyous. She was never had a bad word for anybody. She was always full of joy. And Jesus is preparing his disciples, saying that be prepared. There's going to be a pathway of joy that sometimes we have to journey through that will be of great sorrow. And I don't think the disciples really knew what Jesus meant in this. And so he's trying to explain to them. And then in one verse, I like the verse where he talks about, okay, I'm going to really give you a good illustration of how this is going to work. And he said, when a woman is giving birth, the sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for the joy of a human being born into the world. And so, yeah, it's going to be difficult. We're going to go through hard times. We're going to go through times where, where is our joy? What happened to it? And Christ is saying it's like a mother giving birth. And it's difficult, and it's hard, and it's painful. But at the same time, when that birth takes place, that's all forgotten. All of it is, no one can take your joy from you. Your joy is what is in you. Your joy is what you cultivate, what you nourish. And so, Charles Spurgeon said, when talking about joy, there's a marvelous medicinal power in joy. Most medicines are distasteful, but this, which is one of the best of all medicines, is sweet to the taste and comforting to the heart. The blessed joy is very contagious. Isn't it nice to be in a room of contagious, joyous people? That is just so satisfying. And when you have that experience, and sometimes people have gone through a lot of pain, and will probably never ever want to go through those kinds of pain again. But they would not trade the results for anything. They would not trade the results. So sometimes the path of sorrow is a sweet path to joy. Kind of reminds me of the story of a guy who got on the bus every morning, and at the end of the day, he gets on the bus again and he has a limp. And so one of the other passengers says, "Well, I see you in the morning and you don't seem to be limping, but in the afternoon, you get on the bus, you're limping. What's wrong?" The man says, "Well, my shoes are too tight. At the end of the day, it caused me a lot of pain." And so the passenger says, "Well, why don't you try to get some new shoes?" He says, "Well, I don't want to because I wouldn't have that sweet feeling of relief when I take off those shoes." Joy is that sweet feeling of relief. And the world squeezes us and it wants us to conform. And as Christians, we look around and we're coming under attack. The world's trying to conform us and saying, no, Christians have it all wrong. You know, and you have to be more open and accepting, and you tend to be so hostile, and you're not forgiving. And no, you know, God has some ways this world should run, and I'm sorry, the world is not of God. The world is of Satan, and you can see that He is in full control. Christians are coming under attack, both spiritually. The deceiver is great for bringing us under attack. 11 Christians a day die for their belief in this world. It wouldn't take very long to wipe out this room, would it? And when you think about that in those terms, 11 Christians a day die for their belief. But yet, somehow, Jesus says we're going to endure difficult times. I think of poor old Job. You know, my uncle had a statue in his office of Job, and it's just like this. It's a man with his hand, his face is covered with his hand, and the title of the sculpture is Job. And so, you know, things were falling apart for him. He had lost his finances, he had lost his family, his friends, his shelter, you name it, it was taken away from him. And then what is God's response to Job and his pain and his suffering? He says, you know, Job, where were you when I created the earth? Well, I was with you. I was there with you, and I'm still with you. And when we get into those areas of our life that we're cornered and we think, there's no getting out of this, like, where do I turn? Christ is saying, I am with you. I am with you before you were born, and I will continue to be with you, and call on me. And that's what he says in the end of John here, is that, you know, I will continue to be with you, even through the most difficult times. I don't know how many of you, when Pastor Art was here, he gave us this book, 50 Reasons Why Jesus Came to Die. We missed the Easter Sunday where I think he summarized this. I'm not sure, but we weren't here. But going through this book was a struggle. I mean, he is a very deep writer, and some of the things he writes are very deep, and I had to read a few chapters a couple of times. And the one chapter that really struck me was the one where he says, Jesus came to die to gain his joy and ours. How do we find joy in the death of Christ? In Hebrews 12:2, it says, the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despite the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I think Jesus was having joy in knowing that he was going to have a reunion once again with his Father. And it was a joy, a triumph over sin. Sin has not defeated Christ. Christ defeated sin and defeated death. And it was a joy of restoring things to righteousness, the way things should be. And it's a joy to be surrounded by people And then he says in John as well, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. It wasn't just the joy of Christ. Christ wants to share that joy with us. And so that joy is irrevocable and continual. It is there for us forever. And the primary reasons for that joy is of our assurance of salvation. We know that, we are going to be with, we're overcoming the suffering, and we will have eternal joy. And our joy is also in Christ in answered prayer. We see God answering prayer all around us. And sometimes we think that maybe God's on mute, or maybe we're on mute to God, and He doesn't hear us. But and we wonder where He is, but His joy and His peace are there for us. And we can only cultivate that joy by rehearsing His promises daily. If it's something that we're just going to do on Sunday, it's not going to be that effective. If it's just something we do in our evening devotions, that's not going to be effective. It has to be continual. We have to nurture it, cultivate it. It's like walking by that garden, and I'm going out, and I see a weed. Well, do I stop and pull it out? Or do I go on my day? No, I kind of stop and pull it out. When you pull out one weed, you can't pull out just one weed. You see the other ones, right? You pull those out, as many as you can see, and that's what our faith, our joy should be like. It's got to be cultivated. It's got to be something that we practice. And you've got to preach the gospel to yourself every day. It's something that you have to do, and it takes time, and it takes energy, but it's worthwhile. Life is hard. And maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time. We're not living in Eden, and we're not living in heaven yet. So, yet, while we're here, we have the freedom to choose to grow in joy or to retreat from it. Life is hard, but believers, if we set our eyes on Jesus, we will constantly be present with the opportunities to make choices that either lead to joy or they lead us not to joy. And here's what I mean. It's hard to stand up against a group when they're going the wrong direction, spiritually or any other way. But it's also hard on your conscience afterwards if we don't. It's hard to be mean to a curmudgeonly old neighbor, but it's hard to be convicted later of being unloving. It's hard not to spend a lot of money on items that we really like, and it's hard to save money, but it's also harder to go into debt. It's hard to have a loving but tough confrontational conversation with a friend, but it's also harder not to have one and have an offense or a distance creep into a friendship, that friendship. It's hard to fight a marriage, but it's even harder to lose a marriage. It's hard to break an addiction, but it's harder to be captivated by one. It's hard to live under the cloak of depression, but it's also hard to step towards healing. It's hard to face the story of your life, but it's harder to live in denial. It's hard to set aside time every single day to be pressed into the heart of God. But sometimes it's hard to pray, and it's hard to find time. But it's harder to live your life daily without the hope and the strength and integrity that Christ gives you. It's hard to pursue living water, but it's harder to live in a dry and thirsty land. It's harder to fight to guard your heart, but it's harder to lose it. When we get the choice, we choose what either leads to cultivating that joy in our hearts and our life, or we choose not to. So every morning when you wake up, I guess there's going to be a hard thing that's going to happen that day. More than likely. But I urge you to choose the joy. Choose life, choose thankfulness, choose to obey, choose the good, and choose Jesus. May the choices we have lead to joy, even when it's hard, even in the middle of suffering. Jesus came to give us life full and let us enjoy our life in Him and the choices that we make that honor Him. Loving Lord, flood our hearts with your perfect peace and that passes all understanding. Immerse us in your joy, knowing that the joy of the Lord is our strength today and our hope for tomorrow. Thank you that as your children we can cling to your faithful promises which are new every morning. Thank you for the joy of being in Christ. Thank you for